Hi everyone, I'm Gracie Reese, and welcome to the very first episode of the Growing Grace podcast. God called me to start this podcast to help encourage fellow believers in their walk with Him through His Word, personal testimonies, and practical advice. So today I'm going to be sharing my personal testimony with you all, just to kind of give you a little bit of background of who I am, and also to hopefully encourage some of you who've gone through some similar things. So I was the kind of kid that went to church definitely for the holidays and then on the weekends, like here and there. My mom and I definitely did not have our priorities in line. She would rather go grocery shopping and I would rather sleep in on a Sunday than get up and go to church. It wasn't really until my dad stopped working on weekends and said that we needed to start making church a priority that's exactly what we did and started going to church more. I didn't really understand it at first because it just wasn't something that we prioritized before, so why are we now? It wasn't until we actually got into the church and I was able to meet one of my now best friends who helped me get more involved. She invited me to one of the events that our youth group was having, and when I went, I truly believe this is when God really started working in my life. I was the Christian girl that would go to church on Sundays and would pray, but that was pretty much it, and I would just go through the motions. But once she invited me to this youth group, I began to change, and I began to sense that change a little bit. So she was the kind of person that would study her Bible. She had so many notes just covering the pages and just different bookmarks in there and just so many notes that I was confused as to how someone found so much in what I thought was a book. And this made me want to dive deeper because if she was getting that much out of it, what am I missing out on? This is when I realized that the Bible is so much more than just a book and that it's a key to life. I began diving into it, and when things didn't really make sense, I sought the answers through either people or a great way that I found was through devotionals. I would have a devotional book or a devotional on my phone even that would help guide me through different pieces of scripture that otherwise wouldn't necessarily make sense to someone who was just kind of diving deeper and just beginning their walk with God. And so I grew close to God pretty quickly after that. Once I dived into His Word and really started taking it to heart, I changed the way I was living so that it aligned with His Word and it aligned with Scripture. I started living my life in ways that I knew would glorify Him and make Him proud and honor Him. And this is when I saw huge positive changes in my life. I still had a pretty typical high school girl experience where there was just, those struggles and the anxiety of it all. But I had God there as my rock and my strength. And this meant that when it was time for me to pick a college to go to, faith played a huge role in where I decided to go. I ended up picking on the college that I'm at because it required theology classes, and I was hoping that because of that, there'd be other believers that were at the same point or higher than I was in my walk with God that would help me be able to grow. I knew a lot of college kids grew away from their faith when they got to school, and I did not want to be one of those kids. I wanted the opposite to happen, and I wanted to grow closer and closer to God, especially after moving away from home. Unfortunately, when I got to school, I didn't do a very good job of keeping that same drive and that same energy. I would still read devotionals and still get in the Word morning and night, but other than that, I made excuses to find a church to physically go to. I would just watch my home church online, and I was extremely homesick. So I struggled a lot with just feeling like I belonged where I was. I struggled a lot with being in a whole new place away from my friends and family. And luckily I did make friends pretty quickly through my roommate and the friends that she'd made through volleyball, which I'm so grateful for. But it was definitely a struggle in the beginning. And when I was struggling so hard, I met a boy, and he jumbled my priorities even more. I had never had a boyfriend before, and I had never even really been flirted with. And this boy came right up to me and started talking to me, saw the cross tattoo I have on my arm, and said, "Oh, you want to go to church? I'll go to church with you. Like, let's go to church." And I became so excited. Not only had this boy showed me an attention that I've never gotten before and I'd longed for, but he was willing to go to church with me too. It was all I could have dreamed of. And so not long after meeting the boy and I started dating, and we would continue to talk about my faith because it was a huge part of who I was. In that, going back to that first conversation, we talked a lot about just the Bible in general and how the specific verse I have on my arm is Joshua 24:15. As for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. And so we got kind of dove into what that meant, and we dove into even going as far as how I was waiting for marriage because that's what the Bible told me to do. And he told me he respected that and that he really thought it was pretty cool because not many people in our generation and in our age have done that and have held true to that biblical standard. And that made me even more excited because I thought I'd found the perfect guy. And so when we started dating, I was pretty confused when he would make excuses to not watch church with me, or he would make excuses to not even just sit and read my devotional with me. I got pretty confused, and because of that, I just made excuses for him. I was like, oh, he's homesick too, he's not ready for this, or oh, like, he'll come to church with me a different time, like he's just really busy with sports and school, and it's totally fine. Sadly, as our relationship progressed, he continued to pressure me for sex, even though we had that conversation the very first day we met that wasn't going to be happening. And he just pressured me to a point where when I said no, he would lie to me, manipulate me, cheat on me, call me names. He told me that he wished my morals weren't so strong, and he told me that he wished I didn't believe everything in the Bible, or that I shouldn't believe everything in the Bible because it was written so long ago. Still, this wasn't my breaking point. I was so blinded by my feelings that I had for him that I just made more excuses. I honestly don't know why. Looking back on it, I can't even defend why I made excuses for him, but I did, and I stayed in the relationship. And because of that, he just continued to wear me down mentally, continued to call me names, continued to just feed me all the lies. And eventually one day I just broke down and I agreed to do sexual acts that I never thought I would or never wanted to do before marriage. And I didn't really know what to do with myself. He got me to agree to this, and I just thought that was the end of it. I didn't really understand that it was actually sexual assault. I thought that because I just had given in that it was kind of okay in the eyes of the world, and it just made me feel really dirty, and I kind of broke down about it to my friends, but it's what the world tells us that we're supposed to be doing as young adults. It's what we're pretty much just is encouraged. And so I didn't really know what to do or how to feel about it. I knew that it had gone against my morals and my beliefs, and because of that, it just made me feel dirty and guilty. And I came to him with these feelings, and he told me that it was fine and that we would repent and talk about it later, and it would be fine. God would forgive us. It still didn't sit well with me, but I still didn't leave the relationship. It wasn't until a couple months after that when I didn't fully give in and go all the way with him, that he ended our relationship because he just couldn't do it anymore. And I was heartbroken. I am so glad that God ended that relationship now looking back on it, but in the moment I really struggled because I just wanted him to see the world from my perspective, and I wanted him to grow in faith so badly. But now looking back, I realized that dating him was not the way to get him there. But I struggled a lot with my mental health after that, or during that breakup. everyone told me that, you're going to be okay. Like, I know it sucks now, but it's your first breakup. The first one's always the worst. It'll get better. I wasn't getting better. I still felt that sense of just, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't feel like me, and I struggled a lot with depressive episodes. I luckily never had thoughts of suicide, because even though I had distanced myself from God so much in that relationship, I still had stuck in his word, and I still knew his truths deep in the back of my mind because of the relationship I had with God going into college. But I did struggle with depressive episodes, and I did have pretty bad panic attacks when I saw him walking around campus. I didn't really understand what any of this was until after the school year was over and I went home for the summer. I was still trying to deal with all of this trauma privately when I was told that I was going to be losing my childhood dog and best friend, the dog that would lick the tears off of my face, the dog that would always be there for me, always just be so excited to see me. And she was a huge part of my life. And now when I was dealing with all this private trauma that my parents knew nothing about, I was told I was going to lose this dog. And I broke even more inside. I didn't know what to do with myself. And luckily, I just continued to press into God and use him for strength. It was really difficult. But because of it, it drove me to a Christian therapist, and she was able to help me in so many different ways. God used that woman in my life in such amazing ways, and I'm so thankful for it, because she was able to help me get back on the path and help me grow closer to God, help me feel connected to him again. I also was able to connect with God on a deeper level again because I found a church in my college town that prayed for me consistently and just helped me through what was my lowest point in life. And I was so grateful that when I returned in the fall, I thought that I was going to be totally fine, and I knew I still had some things to heal from, but sadly I was still dealing with some of those panic attacks and depressive episodes. But luckily God delivered me from all of that not long after getting back to campus, and he answered so many of my prayers with just restoring my mental health in ways that I honestly didn't even know were possible. And it led to me just feeling like myself again, and I hadn't felt like myself in such a long time that I was just so grateful for it. And even though there was still those rough days, I just finally felt happy and like myself again. And when I finally felt like myself again, I met someone who God put in my life to help me fully move on and heal from all of the stuff that I had gone through. And I couldn't have been more grateful, and I couldn't have been more happy. This person just started off as a friend, but he became my boyfriend. And when we started dating, he just continued to grow in his faith, and I continued to grow in mine, and we helped each other to grow. He went to church with me, we prayed together, we did devotionals together, and as our relationship progressed, we even talked about what a possible future together would look like. We started talking about just what our future would look like as two Christians who are chasing after God together. And I was so happy. I thought God had given me my person, and I was like, I now understand. I went through all of that to find him. And I just prayed that God would have his way in our relationship. And he did, but not in the way that I was wanting or expecting. And this boy ended our relationship, and I was extremely confused. I didn't see it coming. I was deeply hurt, but I was more hurt because I didn't understand why God had allowed me to think that he was the one. I didn't understand why God pointed him out to me the way he did and made me allowed me to have those feelings towards him that I did. I was extremely confused, extremely angry at God even for just putting me through that if that's how it was going to end, because I so wholeheartedly thought that this guy was my person. And when he ended it, I turned to God with my fists in the air, and I just didn't understand. I didn't know why it had to happen, and I didn't know why it had to all happen the way it did. But instead of pushing into God with these questions and these emotions, I pushed them away. I still had the faith that God was up there, that he was a loving God, and I still had the faith that Jesus was king and died for my sins, but my hope was gone. I even spoke the words that I didn't want a future if my ex-boyfriend wasn't going to be in it. I was so upset with God that I still didn't have those suicidal thoughts, but I did have the thoughts of not wanting a future if he wasn't going to be in it. And I just felt so lost, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. I felt like I just wanted to vanish, and I felt empty. And instead of turning to God and asking him to refill me, I just had all these unanswered questions, and I let them go wild in my head. I let them go rampant in my head. And at this time, some of my friends were going out every weekend, and it always looked like fun, but I was always like, no, I'm just going to stay home and talk to him on the phone, or I'm just going to stay home and get some extra sleep. But when this breakup happened, I couldn't stand being by myself. I couldn't stand I couldn't stand anything. I didn't feel like myself. I felt uncomfortable and out of my skin no matter where I was. And so I decided that one weekend I was going to go out with my friends, and I was going to drink, and I was going to have a good time, and I wasn't going to get drunk because the Bible said not to get drunk. I still held those values so strong. Still got up and went to church the next morning. But once again, I was hopeless. My hope, it was gone. And when I went out, I sought male validation. After the breakup, I wanted to feel good again, and I wanted to feel good about myself, and I wanted to feel just the joy of somebody wanting you. And unfortunately, I hate admitting it, but if I went out during a weekend and got a guy to turn his head or to approach me, I was happy. And as the weekends went on, I would have to do one extra thing or have one extra drink or just have one extra guy turn his head in order for me to find the joy that I had found the previous weekend. And in all this, I just continued to lose myself more and more. Like I said, I still would go to church Sundays. I still held the same values and beliefs that I did before, but I allowed the worldly temptations to take over. And I one day just had a wake-up call that I wasn't me anymore, and I needed to fix it. I needed to do something to change it. And I didn't know what to do. I was still angry at God. I didn't want to feel the pain that I was feeling before. I did not want to feel those feelings again. I just wanted to be carefree and to have fun and to just have that joy. But with that wake-up call, I realized that the joy I was feeling every weekend was temporary. It wasn't going to be long-lasting. And what I needed to do was pick up my cross and walk with Jesus. I needed to feel the pain now to have lasting joy in the future instead of just clinging to that temporary joy because it was never going to last. With the wake-up call, I realized that I had been trying to keep my wounds open, and a lot of people do this, where we try to keep our wounds open. And because when we keep our wounds open, everyone can see exactly what's happened to us and know why we are the way we are. But the truth is that true healing and true justice comes from when we allow God to take over and heal our situations. The world doesn't really need to know what all happened to us, because true justice, like I said, takes place when we allow God to take over the situation. He is just and he is merciful, and he will take on the situation and show mercy where mercy is given. And it can be extremely hard to allow him to heal, but God isn't just the healer, he's the healing. When we allow him to take over our wounds, our open wounds, and to close them up and to heal them, we are giving him just full control over the situation. He's going to heal every single piece of us from the inside and out. There's not going to be a dark corner of yourself that God can't clean out and make light of, because God is good. And even though I went through an extremely, extremely low point, I had to hit pretty close to rock bottom to realize all of this, but God used my deepest pain to launch my greatest and highest calling, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. If I could go back and not go through all of that, honestly, I probably would. I wish I could have realized all of this without going through all of that, because I don't even recognize who I was as a person. But unfortunately, I had to learn my lesson the hard way, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for me going through all of that. I was always scared writing my testimony that I wasn't going to do a good job sharing it, or that I was going to offend someone by sharing it. I was scared that it wasn't going to be right. Something about it was going to be wrong. But what I had to realize is that my testimony is just my story of God working through my life. And my testimony is never going to be complete until God calls me home to heaven. Each and every day I'm on this earth, my testimony continues to grow, and yours does too. And each and every day that he wakes all of us up means he's not done with us yet. And I am just so beyond grateful that he never gave up on me like I almost gave up on him. That he's been with me every step of the way. And that he has just used all of this pain and hurt to, like I said, launch my greatest calling. If it wasn't for everything that I went through, I wouldn't be doing this podcast. I wouldn't be sharing this all with you. And even though this podcast is a huge step outside of my comfort zone, I am just so beyond grateful to the support system that God has given me through my family and my friends. And I'm just so beyond grateful that I had Jesus to redeem everything that I have walked through, and that he has just never given up on me, and he's never given up on any of you either. He will always use our mistakes to just launch us somewhere so much better than we could have ever imagined. And he has such amazing plans for each and every one of us. And I just can't wait to see what he does through this podcast. I know that he has some pretty special things planned, and I am pretty honored that he has chose me to work through in this season of life and in this generation. And with that being said, I just want to thank each and every one of you for watching the very first episode of the Growing Grace podcast. It's been a long time coming, but I am just so excited to see God work in not only my community, but just all the communities that are reached through this podcast. I'm so excited to see what God does.